The envelope arrived on a Tuesday. I was standing at the kitchen counter when my mother brought it in from the mailbox, her reading glasses perched on her nose as she sorted through catalogs and bills. She handed me a thick, cream-colored envelope without looking up, already moving on to the next piece of mail. "For you," she said absently. The return address was a law firm I didn't recognize. Blackwood and Associates, located downtown in a part of the city where buildings had marble lobbies and security guards who checked IDs. I opened it standing there, my coffee going cold beside me. The letter was 3 pages long, dense legal language that took me 2 read-throughs to understand. But certain phrases stood out immediately, sharp as glass. Outstanding balance of $847,000. Collateral guarantor, personal liability, immediate action required. My name was on every page. My signature, or something that looked enough like my signature that I couldn't immediately prove it, wasn't. Appeared on documents I'd never seen before. Loan agreements for renovations to a commercial property I didn't own. Equipment leases for machinery I'd never heard of. A line of credit that had been opened 3 years ago and maxed out 6 months later. All of it attached to my father's business. All of it now demanding payment from me. I read the letter a 3rd time, then a 4th. My hands weren't shaking yet. That would come later. Right now, I felt nothing but a strange, cold clarity. My mother was still sorting mail, humming something under her breath. "Mom," I said quietly, "did you know about this?" She looked up, distracted. "Know about what, honey?" I held up the letter. Did Dad ever mention taking out loans in my name? Her expression shifted. Not quite confusion, not quite concern. Something more careful. "Your name? No, of course not. Why would he do that?" "Because apparently he did." I set the letter on the counter between us. "This law firm says I owe almost $1 million for business debts I never agreed to." She picked up the letter, her eyes scanning quickly. I watched her face as she read. There was a moment, just a flicker, where something crossed her features that looked like recognition. But it passed so quickly I almost convinced myself I'd imagined it. "This must be a mistake," she said finally. "Some kind of identity theft or clerical error. Your father would never—" "Wouldn't he?" The words came out harder than I'd intended. My mother set down the letter carefully, like it might bite her. "Aaron, your father has been running that business for 30 years. He knows what he's doing. There must be an explanation." "Then I need to talk to him." "He's at the warehouse today. You know how he gets when he's interrupted during inventory." "I don't care." I was already grabbing my keys, leaving my coffee in the pile of mail and my mother's increasingly worried expression behind. The drive to my father's. Business took 20 minutes through morning traffic. 20 minutes where my mind ran through possibilities, trying to find some innocent explanation that made sense. Maybe it was identity theft, like my mother suggested. Maybe someone had forged my signature. Maybe this was all a misunderstanding that would be resolved with a single phone call. But I kept thinking about the date on those loan documents. 3 years ago, right after I'd moved back home to help with my grandmother's final illness. Right when I'd been too exhausted and grief-stricken to pay attention to much of anything else. Right when I would have signed almost anything my father put in front of me if he'd asked. The warehouse was in an industrial park on the east side, surrounded by similar low-slung buildings with corrugated metal roofs and small parking lots. My father's company, Hawthorne Import and Distribution, occupied the largest unit in the complex. The sign out front was faded but professional, the kind of business that had been stable and unremarkable for decades. I parked near the office entrance and let myself in. The receptionist's desk was empty. My father never kept consistent office staff, preferring to handle paperwork himself or delegate it to my mother when she had time. I walked through the small reception area into the back offices, following the sound of voices. My father was in his office, sitting behind a desk piled with invoices and shipping manifests. He was on the phone, his voice carrying that particular tone of forced patience he used with difficult clients. I understand your concerns, Mr. Ridgway, but I can assure you the delay is temporary. Yes, we're working on resolving the supply chain issue. By the end of the month, absolutely. He saw me standing in the doorway and held up one finger. Wait. I waited. He continued the conversation for another 3 minutes, making promises and offering reassurances while I stood there holding the letter from Blackwood and Associates. When he finally hung up, he leaned back in his chair and smiled. Aaron, this is a surprise. What brings you by? I set the letter on his desk. This came for me today. He picked it up, his expression shifting from pleasant surprise to careful neutrality as he scanned the first page. His reading glasses were hanging from a chain around his neck, and he put them on slowly, buying time. Ah, he said finally. Yes, I was going to talk to you about this. Were you? It wasn't a question. He heard the flatness in my voice and set down the letter. Aaron, you have to understand, this is just a temporary cash flow issue. The business has been going through some transitions, and sometimes creditors get nervous when payments are delayed. Why is my name on these documents? Because I needed a co-signer. The bank required. When did I sign them? He hesitated just for a second, but I caught it. You don't remember. It was a few years ago. You were helping with some paperwork, and I explained that I needed your signature for... I never signed loan documents, Dad. I would remember that. Well, you were going through a difficult time, your grandmother's passing, all that stress. Maybe it just slipped your mind. Don't! The word came out sharp. My father stopped talking. I pulled out one of the chairs across from his desk and sat down, forcing myself to breathe slowly, to think clearly, to not let anger cloud what needed to be a very specific conversation. Let me be very clear, I said. I have no memory of signing any loan documents. I have no memory of agreeing to be liable for business debts. I have no memory of any conversation where you explained this to me, so either my memory is completely unreliable or you forged my signature. That's a serious accusation. Which is it? We looked at each other across his cluttered desk. Outside, I could hear the sound of forklifts moving through the warehouse, the beep of reversing trucks, the ordinary sounds of a business day continuing regardless of whatever was happening in this office. My father took off his reading glasses and rubbed his eyes. When he spoke again, his voice was different, quieter, almost resigned. The business has been struggling, he said, for longer than I've let on. Import costs have been rising, profit margins shrinking. I took out some loans to modernize the equipment, expand our capacity. I thought it would turn things around. And did it? Not yet, but it will. These things take time. Why use my name? Because my credit was already extended. The bank wouldn't approve additional loans without a co-signer who had cleaner financials. He looked at me directly. You had just started your new job. Good salary, no debt, excellent credit score. You were the obvious choice. The clinical way he said it, like I was a financial instrument rather than his daughter, made something cold settle in my chest. And you didn't think to ask me? I knew you'd say no. At least he was being honest now. So you forged my signature. I obtained your signature legally. You signed the documents. You just didn't realize what you were signing. I thought back to 3 years ago. My grandmother dying by inches in a hospice bed. My mother falling apart. Me taking time off work to handle funeral arrangements and estate paperwork and 1,000 other tasks. My father bringing me stacks of documents to sign. Power of attorney forms, insurance claims, bank account transfers. Just sign here, honey. I'll take care of the rest. You hid them in the estate paperwork, I said slowly. You gave me your business documents mixed in with Grandma's papers, and I signed them because I trusted you." He didn't deny it. "I did what I needed to do to save this business, to save our family's livelihood. Your mother and I have our entire lives invested in this company." "Then you should have asked me. You should have explained the situation and requested my help like an adult instead of tricking me into it like a—" I stopped, took a breath. "How much do I actually owe?" He glanced at the letter. "The figure they're citing is inflated. It includes penalty fees and—" "How much?" "Around 800,000 in principal." "But Erin, you're not going to have to pay it. The business will—" "The business is failing. You just said so. It's going through a rough patch." "How rough?" He was quiet for a long moment. "We're behind on several payments. The bank has been understanding so far, but there have been some collection notices. Nothing serious yet." "Collection notices are serious, Dad." "Only if you let them be. I've been in business for 30 years. I know how to manage creditors. This will blow over if we just—" "If we just what?" "I'm not part of this business. I don't work here. I have my own career, my own life. You had no right to—" My phone buzzed. I ignored it. It buzzed again and again. I pulled it out. 3 missed calls from my mother. 2 text messages. "Where are you?" Your father called. "Please don't do anything rash." I looked at my father. He had his phone in his hand, screen still lit. "You called Mom?" "She has a right to know what's happening." "What's happening is that you committed fraud. You forged my consent to take on debt I never agreed to. That's not how a court would see it. You signed the documents. Your signature is right there. Under false pretenses. But you signed them. And the law doesn't particularly care about why. It cares about the signature and the debt." He leaned forward. "Erin, I understand you're upset. You have every right to be. But if you push this, if you try to challenge these loans legally, it's going to get very messy, very public, very expensive, and in the end, the debt will still be there." "Then you'll have to deal with it." "I can't. My assets are already leveraged. The house, the business, everything. If the bank moves on this debt, they'll come after whatever resources they can find. And right now, that's you." My phone buzzed again. Another message from my mother. "Please call me. We need to talk about this as a family." I stood up. My father watched me, his expression unreadable. "I'm getting a lawyer," I said. "Erin, I'm getting a lawyer, and I'm going to find out what my options are. And Dad," I picked up the letter from Blackwood and Associates. "If you ever forge my signature again, I'll have you arrested." I walked out before he could respond. The law firm I found was small, specializing in contract disputes and fraud cases. I chose them specifically because they weren't the kind of white shoe practice that would have conflicts of interest with every major business in the city. I needed someone who would fight without worrying about future clients or professional relationships. The lawyer's name was Isaac Merrick. He was younger than I expected, maybe mid-30s, with the slightly rumpled appearance of someone who spent more time on casework than professional image. His office was on the 3rd floor of a converted brownstone, cluttered with file boxes and legal textbooks. He read through my documents while I sat across from him, watching his expression shift from polite interest to focused concentration. "This is problematic," he said finally. "Problematic how?" "Your signature is on these documents, multiple documents across multiple institutions. And while you claim you didn't know what you were signing, proving that in court is extremely difficult. The law assumes adults read what they sign, even if they were deliberately deceived. Deception is hard to prove, especially when it's your own father. Courts generally assume family members act in good faith with each other." He set down the papers and looked at me directly. "What exactly are you hoping to achieve here?" "I Want out. I want my name removed from these loans, my liability eliminated. I want this to be his problem, not mine. That's going to be challenging. The creditors aren't going to voluntarily release you from the debt, especially since your father apparently can't pay it himself. Your best option might be to negotiate a settlement. With what money? I don't have $800,000 lying around. Neither does your father, apparently, which means the creditors are going to be motivated to work with whoever they think they can actually collect from. He paused. Have you considered bankruptcy? I'm not destroying my financial future because my father lied to me. Then we need to find leverage, something that makes the creditors prefer to work with your father instead of you, or something that makes your father prefer to take on the full debt himself. What kind of leverage? Isaac leaned back in his chair, thinking, well, one option is to make the alternative, more expensive for him. If we can show that pursuing you will lead to criminal fraud charges against him, that might motivate him to find another solution. Would it actually lead to charges? Possibly. If we can prove he deliberately deceived you about what you were signing, that's fraud. But prosecutors are often reluctant to pursue family cases unless the evidence is absolutely overwhelming. He hesitated. There's another angle. These loans are attached to his business. If the business is already failing, creditors might be willing to settle for a percentage rather than risk getting nothing in a bankruptcy. But that requires your father to cooperate. He won't. Then we need to make him. We talked for another hour, going through the documents line by line, building a timeline of when each loan was taken out, when payments stopped, when collection efforts began. Isaac took detailed notes, occasionally asking questions about my relationship with my father, my grandmother's estate, the circumstances around signing the paperwork. When I finally left his office, it was late afternoon. I sat in my car for a long time before starting the engine, just staring at the legal documents spread across my passenger seat. My phone had 17 missed calls, 12 from my mother, 5 from my father. I didn't call back. My mother was waiting at my apartment when I got home. She'd used the spare key I'd given her for emergencies, and she was sitting on my couch with her purse in her lap, hands folded, back straight, the posture of someone who had been there for a while, working up the courage for a difficult conversation. "Aaron," she said when I walked in, "we need to talk." I set my keys on the entry table and hung up my coat. "If Dad sent you?" "Nobody sent me. I'm here because I'm your mother, and I'm worried about you." I walked past her into the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. My hands were steadier than I expected. "You knew," I said. Not a question. There was a long silence behind me. "I knew the business was struggling," my mother said finally. "I knew your father had taken out loans. I didn't know he'd used your name until today." I turned around. "Really? You had no idea?" "He handles the business finances. That was always his domain. I manage the household accounts. He manages the company. It's been that way for 30 years. Convenient." Her expression hardened slightly. "Don't take that tone with me. I am not the villain here. No, you're just the person who knew Dad was lying and said nothing. I didn't know. You knew something was wrong. I saw your face this morning when you read that letter. You recognized it. Maybe you didn't know the specific details, but you knew Dad had done something questionable, and your first instinct was to protect him." She stood up, gripping her purse. "Your father has spent his entire life building that business, building a life for us, for you. Everything we have came from that warehouse and his work. If he made some questionable decisions to keep it afloat, he committed fraud, Mom. He forged my consent to take on massive debt. That's not a questionable decision. That's a crime. It's complicated. It's actually very simple. He lied to me. He used me, and now I'm legally liable for hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt that I never agreed to." My mother's shoulders sagged slightly. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter. "What do you want me to say, Aaron? That your father is perfect? He's not. He made a mistake. but he was desperate, and he was trying to save everything we've built by destroying my financial future. He didn't think it would come to this. He thought the business would recover, the loans would be repaid, and you'd never even know. He was trying to protect you from the stress of... Don't. I set down my water glass carefully. Don't reframe this as protection. He was protecting himself. He was using me as a financial shield without my knowledge or consent, and now that it's fallen apart, I'm supposed to just accept it because family? I'm asking you to consider the consequences. If you push this legally, if you try to remove yourself from these loans, your father could face criminal charges. The business could go under. We could lose everything, the house, our savings, our retirement. Is that what you want? What I want is to not be financially destroyed by my own father's lies. We stared at each other across my small kitchen. Outside, I could hear traffic, someone's music playing too loud, the ordinary sounds of a Tuesday evening. Everything normal except this. There has to be a compromise, my mother said finally. Some way to resolve this that doesn't tear the family apart. The family's already torn apart. You just didn't notice because I was the one bleeding. She flinched. That's not fair. Fair? You want to talk about fair? But I stopped myself, took a breath, counted to 10 the way my therapist had taught me years ago. Mom, I said more calmly, I love you. I love Dad. But I can't sacrifice my entire financial future to save his business. I won't. And if you're asking me to do that, then you need to leave. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she picked up her purse and walked to the door. She paused there, one hand on the knob. When your grandmother was dying, she said quietly, you were the one who held everything together. You managed the medical care, the funeral arrangements, all the legal paperwork. You were so strong, Erin, so capable. Your father and I were falling apart, and you just handled it. You've always been the strong one. Maybe I'm tired of being strong. She opened the door. I hope you know what you're doing. Then she was gone. I stood in my empty apartment, listening to her footsteps fade down the hallway. Then I picked up my phone and called Isaac. I want to move forward, I said when he answered. Whatever it takes to get my name off these debts, I want to do it. Even if it means your father faces consequences. I thought about my mother's face when she'd read that letter this morning, the flicker of recognition she'd tried to hide, the way she'd immediately moved to defend him, to position me as the problem. Especially then, I said. The first hearing was 3 weeks later. Isaac had filed a motion to contest the debts, arguing fraud and lack of informed consent. The creditors, a consortium of 3 banks and 2 equipment leasing companies, had responded with their own motion to enforce the loans and begin collection proceedings. We met at the courthouse downtown in one of those small conference rooms where preliminary hearings happen. No jury, no drama, just lawyers and a judge reviewing documents and making procedural decisions. My father was there with his own lawyer, a man named Douglas Ashcroft, who had the expensive suit and smooth confidence of someone who'd been handling business litigation for decades. They sat on one side of the table, Isaac and I on the other, with the judge at the head. My father wouldn't look at me. Judge Marilyn Fairchild reviewed the documents for what felt like an hour, occasionally asking questions, making notes. Finally, she looked up. Mr. Merrick, your client is arguing that she signed these loan documents without understanding their nature or consequences. That's correct, Your Honor. Ms. Hawthorne was presented with these documents during a period of significant personal and family stress, mixed in with estate paperwork for her deceased grandmother. She was led to believe she was signing routine administrative documents, not loan guarantees. And yet her signature appears on every page, including next to clauses that explicitly outline the terms of the guarantee and her personal liability. Signature under false pretenses is still a signature, Mr. Merrick. The judge looked at my father's lawyer. Mr. Ashcroft. Your Honor, this is a straightforward matter of contract law. Miss Hawthorne signed legally binding documents. She's an educated adult with a responsible career. The law assumes she read what she signed. Any claim that she was deceived is purely her word against her father's, and frankly seems like an attempt to avoid legitimate financial obligations. The judge made another note. Ms. Hawthorne, did you review these documents before signing them? I stood up. No, Your Honor. I was told they were estate documents related to my grandmother's passing. I trusted my father when he said they were routine paperwork. But you signed them! Yes. Multiple documents across multiple pages without reading any of them. Put like that, it sounded incredibly stupid. I felt Isaac tense beside me. I was grieving, Your Honor, and I trusted my father. I didn't think I needed to. Trust is not a legal defense, Ms. Hawthorne. The judge looked at both lawyers. Here's my preliminary ruling. The signatures are valid. The documents are legally binding. Ms. Hawthorne's claim that she didn't understand what she was signing is unfortunate, but not sufficient grounds to invalidate the contracts. However, she paused, looking directly at my father. If Mr. Merrick can provide evidence that Mr. Hawthorne deliberately misrepresented the nature of these documents, that would constitute fraud and could potentially void the contracts. I'm giving you 30 days to gather such evidence. We'll reconvene at that time. The gavel came down. Isaac and I walked out together. Behind us, I could hear my father and his lawyer talking in low voices. That could have gone better, Isaac said quietly. But it could have been worse. We have 30 days to build a fraud case. How do we do that? We need evidence that your father intentionally deceived you. Emails, text messages, testimony from witnesses who heard him discuss this plan. Anything that shows he knew you didn't understand what you were signing and proceeded anyway. I don't think he wrote that down. People are often less careful than they think. Let me start with discovery requests. We can compel your father to turn over business records, communications, anything related to these loans. Sometimes the evidence is there. You just have to know where to look. We stepped out into the courthouse plaza. It was one of those early spring days where the air still had winter's bite, but the sun promised something warmer coming. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother. Can we please talk? This is killing your father. I showed it to Isaac. He read it and frowned. Be very careful about any direct communication with your parents right now. Anything you say could potentially be used against you. If they want to talk, they should go through me. She's my mother, who has already demonstrated she'll prioritize your father's interests over yours. I'm not saying cut her off completely. I'm saying be strategic. I looked at the message again. Then I typed a response. Tell Dad he should have thought of that before forging my signature. I didn't send it. Instead, I deleted it and put my phone away. 30 days, I said. What are my chances? Isaac was quiet for a moment. Honestly, if we can't find clear evidence of fraud, you're probably going to remain liable for these debts. Your best outcome at that point would be negotiating a settlement or payment plan that doesn't completely destroy your finances. And if I just refuse to pay, they'll sue you, win a judgment, and start garnishing your wages. They could put liens on any property you own, freeze your bank accounts, destroy your credit for years. Courts don't care about fairness, Aaron. They care about contracts and signatures. Even fraudulent ones. Even ones we can't prove are fraudulent. We stood there for a moment in the cold sunlight. Then Isaac's phone rang and he excused himself to take the call. I watched people coming and going from the courthouse. Lawyers in expensive suits, people in jeans looking stressed and lost. police officers escorting someone in handcuffs. All of us caught in the machinery of justice, grinding forward regardless of whether any actual justice was happening. My father and his lawyer emerged from the building. They saw me standing there and paused. Douglas Ashcroft said something to my father, who shook his head. Then they walked the other direction, toward the parking garage. My father still wouldn't look at me. The discovery process took 2 weeks. Isaac filed requests for documents, and my father's lawyer responded with boxes of business records. Invoices, contracts, bank statements, shipping manifests, 3 decades of paperwork from Hawthorne import and distribution. Most of it had nothing to do with the loans in question. "This is intentional," Isaac said, sitting in his office surrounded by file boxes. "They're burying us in irrelevant documents, hoping we'll miss something or give up. Will we? No, but it means this is going to take time and money. Every hour I spend reviewing these documents is billable. You should be aware of what this is costing." I was aware. My savings were draining faster than I'd anticipated. The retainer I'd paid Isaac was almost gone, and he'd already warned me that if this went to a full trial, the cost could exceed what I'd make in a year. But I didn't have a choice. If I didn't fight this, I'd be paying off my father's debts for the rest of my life. So I helped. I took time off work, claiming a family emergency, which wasn't exactly a lie. I sat in Isaac's office and went through boxes of documents, learning more about my father's business than I'd ever wanted to know. Hawthorne import and distribution had been profitable for years. Good margins, steady clients, reliable income. But about 5 years ago, things started to change. Import costs rose, competition increased. My father tried to adapt by expanding the warehouse, upgrading equipment, taking on larger contracts, all of which required capital he didn't have. The first loan was relatively small, $50,000 for a new forklift and inventory system. He'd used the business as collateral, and it had been approved easily. That loan was paid off on schedule. The second loan was larger, $200,000 for warehouse expansion. That one had required my mother's signature as well as his, since they jointly owned the business property. It had been approved, but payments started to slip after the first year. The third loan was where things got complicated. $400,000 for specialized climate-controlled storage and new import contracts with overseas suppliers. The bank had required additional collateral and a cosigner with good credit. My father's personal finances were already leveraged, and my mother's credit had been damaged by the late payments on the previous loan. That's when my name started appearing. The documents were dated 3 years ago, right in the middle of my grandmother's final illness. My signature appeared on page after page, neat and consistent. Below each signature was a clause confirming I'd read and understood the terms, that I accepted full personal liability, that I acknowledged this debt could follow me regardless of the business's performance. All of it legal, all of it binding, all of it obtained while I was signing my grandmother's death certificate and funeral arrangements and insurance claims. "Look at this," Isaac said, pulling out a different document. "This is an email from your father to the loan officer at the bank." I read it over his shoulder. "Dear Mr. Tolliver, please find attached the completed loan documents with my daughter's signature as cosigner. As discussed, she's employed in financial services with an excellent credit rating and no existing liabilities. I've explained the terms to her, and she's fully supportive of the business expansion. Please proceed with finalizing the loan. Regards, Evan Hawthorne." The email was dated 2 days after my grandmother's funeral. "He lied to the bank," I said slowly. "He told them I understood and supported this when I had no idea what I was signing." "Can you prove that? Can't we use this? It shows he was actively misrepresenting. It shows he told the bank you understood. It doesn't prove you didn't. For all we know, he genuinely believed you understood what you were signing." Isaac set down the email. "We need more than this. We need something that shows he deliberately concealed the true nature of these documents from you. We kept looking, days blurred together. I stopped going home, sleeping on Isaac's office couch when it got too late to drive back. We ordered takeout and drank too much coffee and went through box after box of documents. And then, on day 12 of the discovery process, I found it. It was buried in a box of personal correspondence, letters and cards mixed in with business files. A handwritten note from my father to my mother, dated 3 weeks before my grandmother died. Marilyn, the bank is requiring a co-signer for the expansion loan. I'm planning to have Erin sign when she's here dealing with your mother's estate paperwork. She'll be distracted and stressed, easier to get her signature without a lot of questions. I know you don't like this approach, but we're out of options. The business needs this loan, and Erin has the credit profile we need. Don't mention it to her. Let me handle it. I read it 3 times. Then I handed it to Isaac. He read it in silence. Then he looked up at me, and for the first time since I'd met him, he was smiling. "This is it," he said. "This is proof of intent to deceive. This shows he deliberately planned to mislead you about what you were signing. This is fraud. Will it be enough? It's more than enough. This combined with the timing of the signatures, your testimony about the circumstances. Yes, this will void those contracts." I should have felt relieved, vindicated, triumphant. Instead, I just felt tired. What happens now? Now we file an amended motion with this evidence. The judge will review it, likely rule in your favor, and remove you from liability for these loans. Your father will be solely responsible for the debt. And the creditors? They'll pursue him directly. If he can't pay, they'll likely force the business into bankruptcy and liquidate the assets. He'll lose everything. That's not your fault, Erin. He created this situation. You're just protecting yourself from his decisions. I looked at the note again. My father's handwriting, familiar from birthday cards and Christmas lists and notes left on the refrigerator. The same handwriting that had signed my report cards and permission slips and college recommendation letters. The same handwriting that had plotted to use me without my knowledge or consent. "File the motion," I said. The second hearing was scheduled for the following week. My father must have known what was coming because he called me the night before. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Erin." His voice sounded older than I remembered, strained. "We need to talk. Talk to my lawyer. Please. Just 5 minutes. Father to daughter, not through attorneys." I sat down on my couch, phone pressed to my ear. "You have 3 minutes. Your mother told me about the note, the one you found." He was quiet for a moment. "I can explain." "I don't want explanations. I want my name off those loans. If you push this, I'll lose everything. The business, the house, our retirement, your mother's security. Everything I've built for 30 years will be gone." "You should have thought of that before forging my signature." "I didn't forge anything. You signed those documents under false pretenses that you deliberately engineered. Your own note proves it." More silence. I could hear him breathing. "What do you want?" he asked finally. "What would it take for you to drop this?" "I want out. I want my name removed from every loan document, every guarantee, every piece of paper that makes me liable for your business debts." "That's impossible. The banks won't agree to that without replacement collateral." "Then find replacement collateral, sell the house, liquidate your retirement accounts, whatever it takes. This is your debt, not mine." "You're asking me to destroy my life." "No, Dad. I'm refusing to let you destroy mine." The line went quiet again. When he spoke, his voice had changed, harder, colder. "You're really going to do this? You're really going to tear apart this family over money?" "You tore apart this family when you lied to me. I'm just making sure I survive it. Your mother will never forgive you." That's her choice. Aaron, I hung up. Then I turned off my phone and sat in the dark, listening to my heart pound. The hearing the next morning was brief. Isaac presented the note along with timeline evidence showing when the documents were signed relative to my grandmother's death. He called me to testify about my state of mind during that period, about how my father had presented the documents, about my complete lack of awareness that I was signing loan guarantees. My father's lawyer tried to argue that the note was taken out of context, that it didn't prove actual fraud, that my signature was still legally binding regardless of the circumstances. Judge Fairchild listened to both sides. Then she made her ruling. The evidence presented demonstrates clear and intentional deception on the part of Mr. Hawthorne. The note discovered during discovery shows he deliberately planned to mislead his daughter about the nature of the documents she was signing, taking advantage of her emotional state during a family crisis. This constitutes fraud under state law. She looked directly at my father. The loan documents in question are hereby deemed invalid with respect to Ms. Hawthorne. Her name is to be removed from all guarantees, and she is released from any liability associated with these debts. Mr. Hawthorne will be solely responsible for repayment. The gavel came down. I sat very still, not quite believing it was over. Isaac touched my arm. We won. Across the room, my father had his head in his hands. His lawyer was talking to him urgently, but he didn't seem to be listening. We stood up to leave. As we walked past their table, my father looked up at me. His eyes were red. I hope you're happy, he said quietly. I stopped. Isaac tried to pull me away, but I shook my head. No, I said to my father. I'm not happy. I'm just not destroyed. There's a difference. Then I walked out. The aftermath unfolded over the next 3 months. The creditors, now unable to pursue me, moved aggressively against my father. They demanded immediate payment of the outstanding balances. When he couldn't provide it, they initiated foreclosure proceedings on the business property and began liquidation of the company's assets. Hawthorne Import and Distribution closed in May. My father tried to fight it, filed appeals, hired different lawyers. But without my name as additional collateral, without any way to secure new financing, the business was unsalvageable. The warehouse and equipment sold at auction. The company name dissolved. My mother called me once during this process. Are you satisfied now? She asked. No greeting, no preamble. Your father's life's work is gone. 30 years of building something, and you destroyed it in a few months. He destroyed it when he committed fraud. He was trying to save the business, to save our future, by sacrificing mine. You're young. You have time to rebuild. He doesn't. We're in our 60s, Aaron. We were supposed to be retiring, not starting over from nothing. I was sitting in my apartment looking out at the city. It was a Saturday afternoon. Ordinary people doing ordinary things, walking dogs, carrying groceries, living their lives. Mom, I said quietly, did you ever consider that what he did to me was wrong? Not unfortunate, not regrettable, but actually morally wrong. She was silent for a long time. He's my husband, she said finally. I have to stand by him. Even when he's wrong. Even when he's wrong. That's what marriage means. And I'm your daughter. Doesn't that mean something too? Of course it does. But you're asking me to choose. I'm not asking you to choose anything. I'm just telling you that I'm not going to set myself on fire to keep him warm. And if that makes me the villain in your story, I'll learn to live with it. She hung up without saying goodbye. That was the last time we spoke. The legal bills were substantial. Isaac had warned me they would be, but seeing the final invoice was still shocking. $42,000 in attorney fees, court costs, document review, expert testimony. nearly everything I had in savings. But I was free. My name was removed from the loan documents. My credit remained intact. I could buy a car, rent an apartment, plan a future without the weight of someone else's debt crushing me. I was free, and I was broke, and I was completely alone. My parents stopped contacting me. Extended family, aunts, uncles, cousins who'd heard various versions of what happened, divided into camps. Some understood, most didn't. Family gatherings happened without me, and I stopped being invited to weddings and holidays and birthdays. The narrative that circulated was simple. Evan Hawthorne had worked his entire life to build a business, and his ungrateful daughter had destroyed it over a technicality. I didn't try to correct it. Anyone who needed to hear my side already had. Everyone else had made their choice. 6 months after the final hearing, I was doing better than expected. I'd gotten a promotion at work, not because of any particular brilliance, but because I'd been willing to take on projects other people avoided. Difficult clients, complex problems, situations that required long hours and intense focus. I buried myself in work because it was easier than thinking about anything else. I was good at it. Apparently, trauma made me an excellent employee. One evening in November, I was working late at the office when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Is this Erin Hawthorne? A woman's voice, professional but with an edge of uncertainty. Yes. Who's this? My name is Naomi Kirkland. I'm a forensic accountant with the state's fraud investigation unit. I'm calling regarding your father, Evan Hawthorne. I set down my pen. What? About him. We're conducting an investigation into financial irregularities at Hawthorne Import and Distribution. During the business liquidation, some concerning patterns emerged in the company's records. We have reason to believe your father may have been involved in significant financial fraud beyond what was revealed in your civil case. I was very still. What kind of fraud? I can't discuss the details of an ongoing investigation, but I wanted to reach out because your name appeared in some of the documents we've been reviewing. You were listed as a co-signer on several loans that are now subject to scrutiny. I was removed from those loans. The court ruled. I'm aware of the ruling in your civil case. This is a separate matter. The investigation is focused on whether your father misrepresented the business's financial condition to obtain loans fraudulently. If that's proven, it would be a criminal matter, not civil. I felt something cold spreading through my chest. What do you need from me? We may need you to testify about your father's business practices, what you knew about the company's finances, and the circumstances around the loans you co-signed. An investigator will be in touch to schedule a formal interview. Am I in trouble? Not at this time. Based on what we've seen so far, it appears you were a victim of your father's actions, not a participant. But we need to confirm that through testimony. I'll cooperate fully. Thank you, Ms. Hawthorne. Someone will contact you within the next 2 weeks. She hung up. I sat there for a long time, phone still in my hand, trying to process what I'd just heard. My father hadn't just lied to me. He'd apparently lied to banks, to creditors, to business partners. The fraud went deeper than I'd known. And now the state was investigating. This was going to destroy him. And I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no vindication, no pleasure in his suffering. Just a kind of distant curiosity about what would happen next. The investigator called 2 weeks later. His name was Graham Southwick, and he wanted to meet in person. We arranged to meet at a coffee shop near my apartment on a Saturday morning. He was older, maybe late 50s, with the careful demeanor of someone who'd spent decades interviewing people who didn't want to talk to him. Thank you for meeting with me, Ms. Hawthorne. Call me Erin. He pulled out a digital recorder and a legal pad. I'm going to record this interview. Anything you say may be used in a criminal investigation or prosecution. You have the right to have an attorney present. I don't need a lawyer. I didn't do anything wrong. That's what we're trying to establish. He started the recorder. Tell me about your relationship with your father's business. I told him everything. About growing up around the warehouse, about helping with inventory during summers in high school, about gradually pulling away as I built my own career, about my grandmother's death and the paperwork I'd signed without reading, about discovering the loans in the civil case, and the note that proved my father had deliberately deceived me. Graham took notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions. He was particularly interested in the timeline, when I'd signed what, when payments had started falling behind, when collection efforts had begun. Did you ever have access to the business's financial records? He asked. No. My father kept all of that locked down. He didn't share numbers with anyone, not even my mother. Did you ever suspect the business was in financial trouble? Not until I got the letter from the creditors. Your father never mentioned struggling to make payments, having trouble with suppliers, anything like that? I thought back. He complained sometimes about import costs going up, profit margins shrinking, but he always made it sound manageable, like it was just normal business challenges, not a crisis. Graham made another note. Were you aware that your father had taken out loans under the business name using false financial statements? I sat up straighter. No. What kind of false statements? He represented the business as significantly more profitable than it actually was. He inflated revenue figures, hid liabilities, created fake contracts to show anticipated income that never materialized. The banks made loans based on those misrepresentations. That's fraud. Yes, criminal fraud. If we can prove he did this knowingly and intentionally, he could face significant prison time. I absorbed this slowly. How much did he steal? We're still calculating the full extent, but preliminary analysis suggests he fraudulently obtained somewhere between $2 and $3 million over a 5-year period. $3 million. I'd been fighting to remove my name from $800,000 in loans. The fraud was nearly 4 times that size. Where did the money go? I asked. That's what we're trying to determine. Some of it went into legitimate business expenses, the warehouse expansion, equipment upgrades, but a significant portion seems to have disappeared. Offshore accounts, cash withdrawals, shell companies. We're working with financial forensics to trace it. Graham looked at me directly. Aaron, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Did you benefit from any of this money? No. Did your father ever give you large gifts, pay off debts for you, make unusual transfers into your accounts? No, I've been financially independent since college. I pay my own rent, my own bills. The only money I've received from my father is birthday checks for $50. No large cash gifts, no college tuition payments, no down payment help for a car or apartment. I have student loans. I drive a 10-year-old Honda. I rent a 1-bedroom apartment in a building with thin walls and bad plumbing. Does that sound like someone benefiting from fraud? He actually smiled slightly. No, it doesn't. Which is good for you. We've seen cases where family members claim ignorance, but have lifestyles that clearly benefited from criminal activity. You don't fit that pattern. So I'm not a suspect. Not at this time, but we will need you to provide financial records, bank statements, tax returns, proof of income, to confirm you weren't receiving unreported funds. I'll get you whatever you need. He nodded. One more thing. We may ask you to testify against your father if this goes to trial. Would you be willing to do that? I thought about my mother's voice on the phone. Are you satisfied now? I thought about my father sitting in that courthouse, head in his hands. I thought about the note he'd written, planning to deceive me during my grandmother's funeral. Yes, I said. I'll testify. The indictment came down in February. Evan Hawthorne was charged with 16 counts of bank fraud, 3 counts of wire fraud, and multiple counts of falsifying business records. The prosecution alleged a systematic pattern of deception spanning 5 years, involving multiple financial institutions and millions of dollars in fraudulently obtained loans. The story made the local news. Small business owner accused of massive fraud. The kind of story that generates outrage in headlines and social media commentary. My name was mentioned as a victim who'd been unknowingly used as a loan guarantor. The comments section on the news website was predictably divided. Some people sympathized with me. Others said I must have known, must have been complicit, must have benefited somehow. My mother called for the first time in months. "Are you happy now?" The same question, but her voice was different, broken. "They're talking about 20 years in prison, Aaron. Your father is 62 years old. 20 years is a life sentence." "He committed crimes, Mom. This is the consequence. You're going to let them send your own father to prison." I'm going to testify truthfully about what happened. What the jury does with that testimony is up to them. You're destroying him. You're destroying us. He destroyed himself. I'm just refusing to be destroyed along with him. She made a sound that might have been a sob. "How can you be so cold?" "I learned from the best." Another silence. Then, "I'll never forgive you for this." "I know." The line went dead. I sat in my apartment, looking at my phone. Outside, the city continued its endless motion. Cars and buses and people going about their lives, none of them knowing or caring about my family's implosion. I wasn't sad. I wasn't angry. I wasn't anything. I was just free. The trial was scheduled for May. The prosecution spent months building their case, working with forensic accountants to trace the money, interviewing bank officers and business associates and anyone who'd had financial dealings with Hawthorne Import and Distribution. They subpoenaed my mother's testimony as well. She appeared under protest, represented by a lawyer my father had hired. She testified that she'd had no knowledge of any fraud, that her husband had handled all business finances, that she'd signed documents he'd presented to her without reviewing them carefully. The same defense I'd used, the same defense that had worked for me. But unlike me, my mother didn't have a smoking gun note proving she'd been deliberately deceived. The prosecution suggested she'd been willfully ignorant, choosing not to ask questions because she preferred not to know the answers. They didn't charge her, but they made it clear she'd been complicit through inaction. When it was my turn to testify, I walked into that courtroom with my head high. My father sat at the defense table looking smaller than I remembered, older. His expensive lawyer beside him, prepared to cross-examine me, to try to discredit my testimony, to paint me as a vengeful daughter, destroying her father over a misunderstanding. The prosecutor led me through my testimony, the timeline of events, the circumstances of signing the loan documents, the discovery of the note. I spoke clearly and calmly, answering every question without emotion or editorializing. Then it was the defense attorney's turn. He stood up, buttoned his suit jacket, and approached the witness stand with the confident stride of someone who thought he was about to dismantle my credibility. "Ms. Hawthorne, you claim you had no knowledge that you were signing loan guarantees. Is that correct?" "That's correct." "You're an educated woman. You work in finance. You understand contracts and legal documents." "Yes." "And yet you expect this jury to believe that you signed multiple legal documents without reading them?" I was grieving my grandmother's death. My father presented these documents mixed in with estate paperwork during one of the most difficult periods of my life. I trusted him. That was my mistake. "Your mistake or your excuse?" The prosecutor objected. The judge sustained it. The defense attorney tried a different angle. "You and your father had a falling out over these loans, didn't you?" "We had a falling out over his fraud, yes." "You sued him in civil court." "I took legal action to remove myself from debts I'd never legitimately agreed to." "And when that wasn't enough, you cooperated with the criminal investigation against him." "I provided truthful testimony about his business practices." "Truthful or vengeful?" Objection. Sustained. The defense attorney looked at me for a long moment. "Ms. Hawthorne, Isn't it true that you're testifying here today not out of some commitment to justice, but because you want to punish your father for perceived wrongs?" I met his eyes. "My father committed fraud. He stole millions of dollars from banks using false statements. He used me as collateral without my knowledge or consent. Whether I want to punish him or not is irrelevant. The facts stand on their own. But you do want to punish him. I want him to face consequences for his actions. If that's punishment, so be it." The defense attorney looked like he wanted to push further, but the judge was already warning him about argumentative questioning. He returned to his seat. I was dismissed. As I walked past the defense table, my father looked up at me. Our eyes met for just a second. I saw no remorse there, no apology, just a kind of bewildered anger, as if he genuinely couldn't understand why I was doing this to him. I looked away and kept walking. The verdict came back in 3 days, guilty on all counts. The sentencing hearing was scheduled for 6 weeks later. The prosecution recommended 15 years. The defense argued for leniency based on my father's age and lack of prior criminal history. The judge settled on 12 years in federal prison. My father would be 74 when he was released. My mother was in the courtroom when the sentence was read. I watched her face crumple, watched her reach for my father's hand as the bailiff led him away. He squeezed her fingers once, then he was gone. She turned and saw me sitting in the back row. For a moment, I thought she might come over, might say something. But she just looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Grief, anger, exhaustion, maybe all of it at once. And then she walked out. I sat alone in the empty courtroom for a long time after everyone else had left. That was 8 months ago. I'm 34 now. I have a good job, a nice apartment in a better neighborhood. I've paid off my legal bills and started rebuilding my savings. I go to work, I come home, I live a quiet life. I don't talk to my mother. She writes occasionally, letters forwarded through my old address that eventually make their way to me. I don't open them. I drop them in a box in my closet, unopened. Maybe someday I'll read them, maybe not. My father writes, too, from federal prison. Long letters explaining himself, justifying his choices, insisting he was trying to protect the family, asking me to forgive him, begging me to talk to my mother, to repair what I've broken. Those letters go in the same box. I've been in therapy for 6 months now. My therapist asks me how I feel about everything that's happened. About my father in prison, my mother estranged, my family fractured beyond repair. I tell her the truth. I don't feel much of anything. Not satisfaction that justice was served. Not guilt that my testimony contributed to his conviction. Not grief that my family is gone. Just nothing. She says that's normal for trauma survivors, that someday the feelings will come and I'll need to process them, that I'm probably still in a protective numbness. Maybe she's right, or maybe I'm just done feeling things about people who used me. Last week, I was at a coffee shop near my office when I overheard a conversation. 2 women, probably in their 50s, talking about their families. One of them was saying how her daughter had gotten into some dispute with her father-in-law over money, and how she'd told her daughter to just let it go, to not make waves. "Family is family," the woman said. "You have to forgive. You have to keep the peace." Her friend nodded sympathetically. "Exactly. Sometimes you just have to be the bigger person." I felt something then, not numbness, something sharp and hot and clarifying. I stood up, walked over to their table. "Excuse me," I said. "I couldn't help but overhear. Can I offer you some advice?" They looked startled, but nodded. "Tell your daughter that being the bigger person is just another way of saying, accept the harm done to you without complaint. Tell her that keeping the peace usually means one person stays silent while another person faces no consequences. Tell her that family is not an excuse for abuse." The woman stared at me. I I'm sure the situation isn't that serious. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But your daughter should be the one who gets to decide whether to forgive, not you. And if she chooses not to, that's not a failure of character, that's self-preservation. I walked out before they could respond. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. From something else, something that felt like the opposite of numbness. Anger, maybe, or just clarity. Tonight, I'm sitting in my apartment with a glass of wine, looking at the box in my closet. All those unopened letters from my mother and father. I could read them, I could write back. I could begin some process of reconciliation or at least communication. But I don't want to. I don't want to hear my father's excuses or my mother's recriminations. I don't want to engage in some family therapy drama where we all process our feelings and try to understand each other. I want to live my life without them in it. I want to build something that's mine, unencumbered by their choices and their debts and their version of family loyalty that always seemed to require my sacrifice. I pour the rest of the wine down the sink and put the box back in the closet. Then I sit down at my laptop and start researching graduate programs, MBA options, specialized certifications, advancement opportunities, ways to leverage my experience into something bigger. I've spent enough time dealing with the wreckage of my father's choices. It's time to build something of my own. 3 months later, I get a call from Graham Southwick, the investigator who'd interviewed me. Erin, I thought you'd want to know. We've recovered most of the missing money. I sit up straighter. How much? About $2.3 million. Your father had moved it through several shell companies, but he wasn't as sophisticated as he thought. We traced it all. What happens to it now? It'll be distributed to the creditors he defrauded, minus investigative costs and legal fees. The banks will get most of it back. And my parents? Your mother filed for divorce last month. She's claiming she had no knowledge of the fraud and wants to protect whatever assets aren't directly tied to your father's crimes. The court will probably allow her to keep the house if she can prove it wasn't purchased with fraudulent funds. I absorb this. Did she mention me? No. Why? Just curious. We talk for a few more minutes about technical details, about how the recovery process works, about what happens to the shell companies and hidden accounts. When I hang up, I realize I'm smiling. Not because my mother filed for divorce, not because my father's hidden money was found, but because I'm not part of any of it anymore. I'm free. The letter arrives in April. It's from my mother, but this one is different. Thinner. Just a single page. Against my better judgment, I open it. Erin, I've filed for divorce. From your father. I thought you should know. The lawyer says I can probably keep the house since we bought it before the fraud started. I'll have to sell it eventually. I can't afford the maintenance on my own. But at least I won't be homeless. I know you don't want to hear from me. I know you think I chose your father over you. Maybe I did. I don't know anymore. What I do know is that I've spent 35 years with a man who lied to me about nearly everything. About the business, about our finances, about what he did to you. And I believed him because it was easier than questioning him. You were braver than I was. You asked the questions. You demanded the truth. You protected yourself. I failed you as a mother. I chose comfort over truth. And I lost my daughter because of it. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know that I understand now why you did what you did. I wish I'd had your courage. Mom, I read it 3 times. Then I fold it carefully and put it in a drawer, not the box in the closet with the other letters. Somewhere I might actually look at it again. I don't call her. I'm not ready for that, but maybe someday. Today is my 35th birthday. I'm sitting in my new apartment, bigger than the last one, better neighborhood, closer to work. I've been promoted twice in the past year. My salary has nearly doubled. I'm good at what I do, and people have noticed. I'm building something, not for my family, Not to prove anything to my parents, not to justify my choices, just for me. My phone buzzes, a text from my therapist. How are you doing today? I think about how to answer. A year ago, I would have said I was fine, numb but functional. 6 months ago, I would have said I was angry but managing. Today? Today, I'm something else entirely. I'm good, I text back. Actually good, and I mean it. I pour myself a glass of wine and stand at my window looking out at the city, all those lives happening simultaneously, all those stories I'll never know. People fighting their own battles, making their own impossible choices, surviving their own versions of betrayal. I survived mine. I didn't forgive. I didn't forget. I didn't choose peace over justice or family loyalty over self-preservation. I chose myself. And I'm still here. Somewhere across the city, my father is in federal prison, serving 12 years for fraud. Somewhere else, my mother is packing up a house she's about to sell, starting over in her 60s. And I'm here, drinking wine in my own apartment, living a life they can't touch anymore. I raise my glass to my reflection in the window. Happy birthday, I say to myself. Then I turn away and start planning my future. A future where I'm not anyone's collateral, where I'm not anyone's safety net, where I'm just Aaron Hawthorne, building something that belongs entirely to me. Free. Finally, completely, irreversibly. Free.